All right, so welcome in everybody. We're gonna do a mock check ride with Alex. What's up, Alex? So, Alex, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us when your check ride is, kind of what, whatever you want.
Yeah. So my name's Alex. I started flying October 15th of last year. So I've been about 5 months now. I got about 43, 44 hours, I think. And I've got my check ride scheduled for tomorrow, but weather doesn't look so great. So it'll probably get rescheduled for a different day. But I'm feeling ready. All the flying stuff feels really good. All the book stuff I feel pretty confident on, but there's a lot to it. So you're gonna give me a little test and see how I do.
Awesome, very cool. And then we were talking about this just a second ago, but you do a lot of skydiving. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, do a lot of that. So I've been around aviation my whole life, but I've never actually started flying planes until now. So been jumping out of them for 15 years, but never flown one.
Yeah, now you got to learn not to jump out of them. You just
Exactly right.
stay in and land them. That's funny. Cool. Well, so for those of you, we've been doing some podcast episodes on check ride prep, so you kind of get the gist if you've heard those. But the check ride going to consist of two parts: the oral and the practical part. I was just talking to Alex about, he's going to make a call to probably his examiner and just be like, hey, look, the weather's not good. I'm gonna, you know, say we're not flying tomorrow, but do you want to still do the oral? And we were talking about this, and I think most examiners just want to do it all in one day. So that's probably the answer you'll get, but who knows? But there are kind of two parts to it. And in my check ride, I got through the oral exam, and then during the pre-flight check, we actually found a bolt missing on the airplane. So we had a discontinuance, which actually was kind of a blessing because I could kind of like take a breath and then just focus on the flying part
Yeah.
another time because I was, it's a stressful situation. So yeah, but so we're gonna go through and I'm gonna ask Alex probably more than he'll be asked on his actual thing. Because it's better to, they always say in sports and stuff like that, like make your practices harder than the actual thing. So that's kind of the goal here. Um, and then I've mentioned this before, and I want to tell this to Alex. One of the tips I would give him is to make a good first impression. So you're going to start off with kind of showing your qualifications, going over your IACRA application, your logbook, your documentation, and then proving the aircraft is airworthy and showing the aircraft documentation. If you have everything kind of organized well, right where it's at, that's kind of the first impression. Um, you know, these examiners aren't supposed to have, they're not supposed to change the level of difficulty per person, but they're human. And sometimes if you make a really good first impression and they start to feel confident in your abilities, they may ask you a little bit less questions and it may help you out a little bit if you can really start. I'm not saying it's a hack to not know everything or anything like that, but it's just a good tip to kind of make a good first impression there. Same with when you get in the aircraft, have that good, do a good pre-flight check, pre-flight brief, all that stuff, and nail your taxi. That could also give a first impression of how you handle yourself in the aircraft. So just a tip there. But okay, so you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, cool. So what you're looking at on the screen, by the way, is his cross country nav log. So we're gonna get to that. But first, can you just, I know we're on Zoom, so can't really show too much, but maybe, I don't know if you have them with you, but you can talk to it. But show or tell me the required documentation that you need to be PIC for the check ride flight.
So BPIC, I need to have my driver's or state ID, government issued ID. So that would be my driver's license. And then my pilot certificate. So in this case would be my student pilot certificate because I don't have my private yet.
Yep.
And then I've got a third class medical, make sure that's current and active. And then for student pilots to carry their logbook with the proper endorsements.
Cool. Do you know what those endorsements are?
So I would need, if I'm flying solo, I'd need solo endorsement. So 90-day solo endorsement. I need the, I've got the knowledge test endorsements. And then depending on where I'm flying, if I need a Class B endorsement, that I've been trained and stuff for that.
Cool. And then there's also a like the required, it's kind of another requirement is the required Checkride prep training. That
Yeah, so like the
you kinda,
practical test endorsement.
right. Yeah. So good. You mentioned the knowledge test. So that's like you basically, your instructor says, hey, we went over and we reviewed what you missed on the knowledge test. So I just want to take a moment. Do you have your knowledge test handy?
I do.
What how did you do on that? How many codes, I guess, did you have on there?
So I got an 87. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 codes.
Okay, cool. And we're not going to go over them exactly. I just want to tell the people watching that the codes are going to look like this. They're called ACS test codes. And, so Alex would, and his instructor would look up their code and they would tell them the exact kind of topic that he missed a question on. They're not going to tell you the exact question, but the topic. So then the endorsement is to say that you and your instructor reviewed that topic in detail. So, and I assume you guys did that.
Correct.
Nice. Okay. Let me see here. All right. So you said you have your medical certificate, 3rd class.
Yep.
Is it current, and how do you know that?
Yeah, so it is current. Let's see. The date of my examination was July 24th, 2023. And then since I'm under the age of 40, that is good for 60 calendar months.
Yep. And then, so what day would it expire?
It would expire at the end of that month. So it'd be July 31st of 5 years from then.
Yep.
That'd
Nice.
So 2028.
Yep. Crazy to think about 2028.
Right.
But yep, you got that. Yeah. So that's the calendar month part, right? You get till the end of the month, basically. Yeah. Nice. Nice. Cool. So the FAA is asking more and more about basic med, even if you're not, I don't know about on check rides, but I'm going to ask you a couple, because it might not apply to you. You don't have basic med, but I'm going to ask you a couple basic med questions. If you were to enroll in the basic med program, do you have to get another 3rd class medical AME exam?
No, I would be able to go to my local physician.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. So it's just the first initial.
Yeah.
Exam,
you gotta do
right?
the initial one, and then after that, you can go and see your physician.
Cool. Are there any limitations if you were to have basic med?
There are, but I actually can't remember what they are.
Okay, no worries. I doubt they'll ask you to name them all. And this is a good point right here. If they were to ask you that question, if this was a real test, and you didn't know, I would say yes. So I would be like, yeah, there's limitations. I didn't remember them all, but I can look them up in the FAA if you want me to. So you can do that about 1 or 2 times, be like, hey, I'm going to look them up. And the DPE would be kind of a jerk if they were to ask you to list all the limitations, but anyways. Okay, cool. Let's see here. All right, speaking of like your documents, your permanent address, let's say you change your permanent address, you're going through a move. How does that affect? What do you have to do for your pilot certificate?
You've got to notify the local FSDO, or just ATC that you need that the 30 days you have to notify them of that change.
Yep. And what happens
if you don't? Then I think your privileges are suspended.
Yep. Perfect. All right. So I'm not gonna have you show us because it's kind of hard on Zoom, but at this point they might, have you get your logbook out and they would pull up IACRA and they would make sure it matches the hours in IACRA, but they'd also be looking for, your required hours. So are you part 61 or part 141?
Part 61.
Okay. So what can you maybe name off what the requirements are for the different hours for?
So I know that I need 40 hours total. I need to have um 3 hours of simulated instrument time, and then 3 hours of night flying as well, with I think it's 100 nautical mile cross country and 15 night landings, I think. Something
10,
like that. Maybe it's less than that. 10.
10, 10, yeah.
I'm just thinking of what I have. I know I have 50.
Yeah, that's good.
um and then there's a cross country of 150 nautical miles total length with 3 full stop landings at different airports. Um yeah. Is that pretty close? Is there something I'm missing?
Yep. So the 3 hours of check ride prep that we talked about.
Yeah.
And then so 3 hours cross country total. And then so that's dual, and then 10 hours solo,
Mm-hmm.
and 5 of those solo hours have to be cross country. And then including
Okay.
in that is that long cross country. But yeah, pretty
Yeah.
close. Yeah.
Okay.
And I doubt they're gonna ask you to name them all. As long as you have met those requirements, then you're
Yeah.
probably good there. But I like to do it in these mock check rides just to make sure so you can think about that and make sure you have
For
them
sure.
all. All right. So if you were to receive your private pilot license today, like, we were to give it to you, would you be current to carry passengers tomorrow? Like, let's say you wanted to take, a loved one tomorrow or tonight or whatever, right after you got your license. Would you
Mhm.
be current to do that?
I don't think so. I think as a private pilot, I would need to go and do um 3 takeoffs and landings after I get my license, or I don't know if that would count while I have my student certificate or not. But
So you just have to be PIC,
yeah,
to have those landings. So
yeah. Okay.
uh,
So then in that case, I would be current because I have had solo PIC landings within the last 90 days.
perfect. And then what about at night if you wanted to fly at night with them?
Night would be the same requirements, so 3 takeoffs and landings, but they need to be to a full stop within 90 days.
Perfect. That night, the definition of night, the FAA has a few of those.
Yeah.
For currency, do you know the definition for a night?
For currency, I believe it's civil sunset to civil, or civil twilight to civil sunrise. What is it? Something like that.
Yeah, it's actually 1 hour after sunset, 1 hour
1 hour
before
after.
sun.
Okay.
That's for the passengers. Yeah. Um,
Okay.
yeah, that's one of the tougher questions. Hopefully they don't ask you that, but
So for passenger currency, it'd be 1 hour after and 1 hour before.
yep.
Okay.
All right. So let's see here. All right. So let's say you receive your license. We're going with that scenario. And tomorrow your friend wants you to take them flying, and they say that they'll pay for everything. What do you say?
As a private pilot, I'm not allowed to pay less than my prorated share. So I can't. So if it's just one person, I can't pay less than half.
Perfect. And then could they pay for lunch?
Yeah, they can pay for lunch if I'm paying for the flight expenses.
Right. Perfect. Cool. So what if you go to lunch with your friend and they want to have a couple beers at lunch?
So as a pilot, you're not allowed to knowingly transport people that have consumed alcohol unless it's an emergency.
Great, perfect. And then let's say you were to celebrate tonight because you just got your license and have some drinks, but you're also flying tomorrow. What are the rules for you in drinking alcohol?
So book rules are 8 hours. can't have consumed any alcohol, and no effects either. So even if you hadn't, or you did wait that 8 hours or something and you were still showing effects, that would still be grounds for not flying. And then the alcohol BAC percentage is 0.04. You got to be less than that.
Perfect. You nailed all three. Nice. Usually people forget one of those, like usually they forget the no effects part. So good. All right, so good. Yeah, looks like you're ready to go. In terms of you're qualified to fly today. So let's transition to the aircraft and see if that's ready for us to fly today. So tell me the things the aircraft needs today to be airworthy for us to fly.
So to be airworthy, we need our airworthiness certificate, our registration. You would need a radio operator license if you're traveling outside of the United States, so internationally. But for us, that wouldn't be needed. And then our operating limitations and weight and balance.
Nice. So, what about, so you named the documentation.
Yeah.
And you're correct. And then that airworthiness document, does that expire?
That doesn't have an expiration date, but it can be, it's only valid if the aircraft is maintained to all the records are shown in the maintenance logbooks are up to date.
Right. Yeah. A lot goes into that airworthiness certificate, right? Because it's only about, so I kind of like to think of it, you got your required documents, and then under that airworthiness document, there's a bunch more requirements. Things like inspections, right? So what inspections do have to be met for it to be airworthy?
So there's a handful. We're looking at an annual inspection, a VOR check if you're planning on using VORs for IFR. You've got your 100-hour inspection, your altimeter and pedostatic inspection, transponder inspection, and emergency locator transmitter inspection.
Nice. And then what about equipment wise? What you don't have to name off all the equipment, maybe if you know the mnemonic. But what equipment do you need? Let's say you're flying during the day.
So I have I have that kind of stuff in front of me because there's a bunch of them, and I think I could probably list them all off, but do you want me to list them off if I
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So we've got your airspeed indicator, tachometer, oil pressure gauge, manifold pressure gauge, got altimeter, transponder, no, not transponder, temperature gauge, oil temperature, what else we got? Fuel gauges, landing gear indicator, anti-collision lights, magnetic heading indicator, and then your ELT and seatbelts. I think that was most of them.
Nice. So you're using a tomato flames, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then what if, so good, yeah. So just some feedback there. If they ask you kind of that opened airworthy, what does it take to have the aircraft airworthy today? It's kind of all that stuff, right? It's not just the documentation, because all that stuff is underneath that airworthiness certificate. So it's the inspections, it's the required equipment. What else? There's a couple other things that could make an airplane technically not legal to fly. There's two things in particular. They're kind of similar. Can you think of those?
I mean, one that we didn't mention earlier was the airworthiness directives.
Perfect. Yep.
I'm not sure what else I'm missing.
Yeah, no, that's good. The other one is like open squawks. So if like,
Okay.
if
Yeah.
a pilot finds something in flight, right before your check ride, then they write it in the squawk book, then
Mhm.
technically it has to be signed off by a certified mechanic before it can fly again. So
Yeah.
cool, good job. Um, okay, we talked about the required equipment. We talked about, oh, does the registration of the aircraft, does that expire?
It does expire. I think it's 7 years now.
Yep. Yeah, it just changed not too long ago. Okay, you got the inspections down. All right, so in your actual check ride, I'm gonna actually want to see that these inspections have been met and that any
Mhm.
airworthiness directives are met. So where would you show me that?
In the maintenance logs.
Cool. Yep, perfect. And tip for that, I don't know if you've done that. I know your check ride is tomorrow, but if it gets
Mhm.
rescheduled, to get a hold of those a little bit early if you can, and maybe just make some sticky notes to just be able to flip right to, the
Yeah, I've
annual, the
already
100
gone
hour.
through them with my instructor and
Okay,
already
cool.
put tabs on them and stuff. So I've got a pretty good hand on where to find those.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, that kind of just takes some stress out.
Yeah,
So
I know it was kind of stressful just now seeing those for the first time, like a couple days ago.
yeah, I know, right? They never show students that until like it's
Yeah,
time for the check ride. Yeah, same thing happened to me. And then actually, we I have a lot of gripes about the flight school that I went to, but I found some things that were not not up
yeah.
to what they should be in that logbook. So that delayed my check ride even more. But okay, so hopefully that didn't happen to you. Um, you kind of mentioned this, but I was gonna say, let's say the VOR inspection hasn't been done for like 40 days. Can we fly in our check ride?
Yeah, as long as we're flying VFR.
Right, because VOR is just the inspection is just for IFR, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And then you talked about the 100 hour. Say there 100 hour has been done at 553 hours on the aircraft. Um, and the hours currently sit at 652 hours, but you need to fly, let's say the airport you're at, there's no one to get the inspection done. So you have to fly, it's 3 hours away. Can you do that?
Yeah, as long as if you're going to fly over, as long as you're flying it to a maintenance facility, that's allowed. And then you would just subtract the hours that were overflown from the next 100 hour. So if
Right.
it was due at 5:53 or 6:53, the next one after that would be due at 7:53, regardless of how many hours you flew over.
Right. It's always just 100, 100, 100, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And then do you have to have any special documentation to be able to do that?
Um, yeah, I think you need a special flight permit from the
Perfect.
ATC.
Perfect. Very good. All right. All right. Uh, if our flight today, so one of the pieces of equipment, um, that's not always required, right, is the transponder. So if our flight today, I guess your flight, let's show people kind of your general check ride scenario flight. Um, does this flight require you to have a transponder?
Does not.
Okay. And why? Just you don't have to say all the required areas of transponder, but why is that?
Because for our flight, we're not going through Class Bravo or Class Charlie airspace. In Class D, a transponder is not required, and that's where we're flying to is a Class D airport.
Cool. Yep. Yeah. And then
And you can see Cincinnati airspace is right there, so we're just outside of the
right here.
uh, yeah, just outside the 30-mile threshold.
Right. Oh yeah. Nice. Yeah. Yeah. The 30, the Mode C Vale.
Yeah,
Very nice. Okay. And then below 10,000 feet as well. Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Very good. Let me go back to well, I'll pull up my questions again. Let's see here. We talked about ADs. Oh yeah. Let's say during your pre-flight check, you find that one of the required pieces of equipment is not working properly. How would we go about, like, what would we do essentially? Like, one, could we fly? Two, you know, if we can't fly, what do we have to do to be able to fly?
Yeah. So first we would see, is that piece of equipment on the required list of equipment. So if it is required, then we wouldn't be able to fly. We would have to have a mechanic fix it and log that before we would be able to fly. If it is not on that list, we would still want to have a mechanic at least deactivate it and mark it in op before we would go fly.
Perfect. And you said the tomato flames, which is from straight from the FAR. But there could be other required equipment for your specific aircraft. Where might you find that?
In the minimum equipment list.
And that's in the so that's the MEL, right? So what does your aircraft you're flying tomorrow have an MEL?
I don't believe it does actually.
Okay. So is there there's one more place that, because most trainer aircraft don't have an MEL. They're usually
Yeah.
for large aircraft that have like multiple redundant parts.
Hmm.
But there's one more place that they might be listed. Do you know where that is?
In the POH.
Mhm. Yeah, they have different names, but sometimes it's like a kinds of operations list, where it'll say like, or sometimes it'll just be listed under a required equipment depending on the POH. But
Uh-huh.
the kinds of operations will be like, if you fly, you know, at this altitude, you need this, or it's like a specific requirement for a specific type of operation. But good. Um, okay. Is the landing? I guess we talked about that. Never mind. Let's see here. All right, so let's say your check ride tomorrow was actually at night and not during the day. Uh, what might be some things that you should consider before taking off? What what changes between a day flight and a night flight?
The equipment that is required for the airplane.
And what's that?
So if we are flying an airplane that has fuses, you need to have a backup set of fuses, or at least three of each kind. But my airplane doesn't. We have circuit breakers, so that doesn't apply there. We need a landing light, and then we need anti-collision lights and position lights, and then a source of electricity.
And what's do you know the source of electricity on your aircraft?
For my aircraft, it's an alternator.
Okay. And then is there a backup source?
Um, there's a battery.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Okay. And then what about for like you, the pilot, in terms of flying at night? Is there any difference in like preparation or things you might want to consider?
Um, so I need to be night current if I'm
Yep.
taking passengers. So that would be the 3 takeoffs and landings to a full stop within the previous 90 days. And then, yeah, I mean, physically, it's good to let your eyes adjust for 30 minutes at least. Before, like, so don't look at any bright lights until for 30 minutes until you go and start trying to fly.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that was one of the ones. So yeah, good. All things I was looking for. And then even during flight, um, you want to avoid white
Mhm.
lights. So that's
Yeah.
why we use the red. Um, what about during taxi? Let's say this is just a recommendation, but
Mhm.
let's say there's other you know, aircraft taxiing around too. Is there anything you might want to consider?
Yeah. Keeping the anti-collision light off because that's a bright one that strobes.
Yep. Yeah, because you don't want to blind everyone else, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And then I would probably add as well, you know, if you're answering this, if they ask you this tomorrow, you know, also depends on, on the flight, if it's a long flight, maybe, think of staying warm, maybe some backup batteries because electricity is so important at night, right? And
Mhm.
especially like phone, iPad, or flashlight, like having some backup batteries. It's always a good,
Yeah.
I mean, for any flight, that's a good idea. But those are a couple things I might add as well. Oh, and then understanding takeoff and landing, taxiway and runway lighting systems of where you're going,
Mhm.
because we don't really need that during the day, right? Cool. Good job. Let's see here. Okay, so let's say we're going for a night flight and our landing light, and we need a landing light. I know there's the for hire thing, but let's say landing light's required, but it's not working during our pre-flight check. Can you, as a private pilot, like let's say you just need to replace the bulb, can you do that?
Hmm. I think replacing a light bulb is under preventative maintenance.
Okay. Yeah, I should have known this before I asked. But yeah, I wanted you to say preventative maintenance because you as a private pilot are only allowed to
Yeah.
do that. And it's a long list of things. Let let me see. I
I've
have
read
the
through that list a little bit, and there's a couple of things that, sure, I might be able to replace that one thing, but then to get to that one thing, you have to take a number of other things apart. And
right.
so it's like, can you really?
Yeah, it's a very it's one of the more confusing FARs, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does say replacing bulbs. So yeah, as long as that's all you need to do, right, to get to
Hmm.
that part, yeah, you could do that. So I'm not gonna make you list any of that, but good. Okay, so what's one more thing that you kind of mentioned it. Okay, yeah, you mentioned the kind of required documentation. You mentioned weight and balance and the operating limitations. Where are the operating limitations listed?
So that's all listed in the POH as well as placards on the aircraft itself.
Okay. Can you give me an example of um an operating limitation that's in the cockpit?
The airspeed indicator can show a handful of airspeed
Yep,
limitation.
perfect. All right. And then so the next thing that you mentioned was the weight and balance. So let's pull that up here. I got this from your POH, right?
Hmm.
This is the right one. Okay, cool.
Yep.
So I guess kind of just explain maybe you tell me the numbers and I'll write them in, and then you can tell me the math on it.
Yeah. So for the basic empty weight of the aircraft specifically that I'm going to be flying was 1566.
Okay.
And then total usable fuel at 40 gallons is 240 pounds.
Okay.
And then front passenger and pilot was 370 pounds. And then I put rear baggage or rear passengers because that's where I put my flight bag and something like that has some weight to it. So I put 20 pounds for that just to cover our bases.
Okay.
And then 0 for area 1, 0 for area 2. So that puts our total ramp weight at 2196
Okay.
minus 7 pounds for fuel allowance for start taxi, which takes our takeoff weight to 2189.
Okay. And then you don't have to tell me each moment of each position, but how do you calculate the moment?
Yeah. So for each weight, you have an arm for that location that it's based at. So I multiply the weight times the arm, and that gets you your total moment for that section. And then you would add up all the moments, and then you can take your aircraft weight divided by that moment, and that gives you your total CG arm.
Okay, so what's your total moment that you got there?
Total moment was 91.83.
91.83.
So
that's the CG or the moment?
that's the moment.
Okay, so that's like,
so 91,830.
okay, gotcha. Yeah. So so you just take the moment divided by the weight, and what CG did you get?
42.41 inches. And so looking at the chart, in the POH, that is well within the normal range for the CG.
Let's see here. This one or no?
Yeah, I think it's one more. Yeah, that one.
This one. Let me flip this so we can see it here. All right. So yeah, maybe just tell me what to do. I can't write on this, but I'll kind of move my mouse.
So I took our total moment arm, or moment. So at the bottom, it was 91.83. So if we want to call it 92.
It's like right here. Okay.
Yeah. And then I went up from there to our total weight, which was 2189. So just below 2200.
Right on this normal category thing.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so now it's within that envelope.
Smack dab in the middle. Nice. Yeah. Okay, good job. Do you know a couple questions about that process? Do you know that arm, right? It's in inches. So we said, I think that your CG was like 41 inches or something like that. What is that measured from?
That's measured from the firewall from in between the engine and the cockpit.
Okay. Yeah, that's like the reference data line, right? Nice. Okay. Got some questions around some more here. All right, so let's go back actually to this guy. All right, so let's say let's say you last minute your examiner brings like 80 pounds of bags unexpectedly. And you throw that in station 1, let's say bag area 1. So we have 80 pounds. Just walk me through kind of what you would do to recalculate this.
So I'll go back into the POH in the weight and balance section, where it's got the list of all the arms for each area. I would go and find the arm for baggage area 1, and then multiply that. So say it's 50 inches or something. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but that would give us the moment for that. And then I would have to re-add all the moments to incorporate that one, add the additional weight to the total takeoff weight, and recalculate that. And then from there, you can figure out your new CG arm.
Perfect. Yeah, good. So just want to make sure a lot of students, there's like shortcuts out there, when something changes in the weight and balance. Those things always screwed me up. I always made mistakes when I tried to do the shortcuts. So yeah, just re-add everything, redo everything, and you're good to go. So that's good. All right. What if let's go back to this guy. What do you think? So we're sitting about right here, and we added 80 pounds of baggage. So that's going to take us up to here, right? We're also going to move left or right because the CG is going to change. Where do you think adding 80 pounds to the back of the aircraft, what do you think that would do to the CG?
That would shift it to the right. So if you're moving it further aft.
Right. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, you add weight to the back, you shift the CG to the back. Let's say we are, we're over here somewhere. We added, I don't know, 120 pounds, or I don't know what the number would get us out here, but why is it dangerous to fly outside, for to the right of this boundary?
So if our CG is too far aft, that can create hazards by it can make the plane easier to stall. So it's flying more with all the weight in the back. It is harder to recover from stalls. It wants to constantly be pitching nose up.
Right. Yeah, it'll trend towards stalls. I
Yeah.
think that's a good way to say it. But yeah, perfect. And then what about if we had the opposite? Let's say we had no baggage, not a lot of fuel, and your examiner was like 300 pounds or something, and
Yeah.
we were up
That would
here.
cause for a moment or an arm that's too far forward, and if it's too far forward, the plane has a tendency to want to pitch forward, so it could make takeoffs a little bit harder
Yeah, and then
and
what about,
flaring.
yeah, good. I was gonna say, what about landing as well? Cool. So what's the kind of word that it changes? There's a topic in aviation that the location of the CG in relation to the center of the lift does
The
what?
center of pressure.
Yeah. So what is that? I mean, like, why do we? What's the word? I guess that I'm looking for. So you said that it tends to stall when we have an aft CG. Um, what's an? I guess okay. The word I'm looking for is stability, right?
Okay.
So, when it's aft of CG, what happens to the stability of the aircraft?
Um. Hmm. I mean, it it makes it less stable.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Right. So when you trend to stall, you also make it less stable. I think that would be good to put into your answer there.
Okay.
Um, because stability, so the definition of stability is you're flying along straight and level, you get rocked, right? So bump of turbulence,
Uh-huh.
there's positive, so there's dynamic stability and there's static stability. Static stability means that it's initially going to come back. But if it's just static stability, no dynamic stability, then it's going to always come back to level, but it's going to continue to oscillate. So if you also add in dynamic stability, it oscillates, but then the oscillations get smaller and then you slowly just stabilizes itself. So
Mm-hmm.
we always want our aircraft to have both positive static and dynamic stability. So good. You said when we have an aft CG, we're like, it always wants to do this. And so if we get bumped, it's not going to want to come back. It's actually going to want to go this way towards stall. What about when we're too far forward, right, with our CG?
Yeah.
What about that with stability?
So same thing. It would push it out of stability, and it would probably want to continue to oscillate down.
So it actually makes it a little bit more stable.
Okay.
Um, uh, but it's tricky because it makes it harder to fly at the same time. So too far forward CG is actually more of a
Mm. Yeah,
it
I guess that makes sense.
it shrinks our flight envelope and what we can do. But in terms of stability, it's actually it makes it do this quicker. So
Okay.
but yeah, that I think
I
that
don't
would
know.
be. I know some examiners they like to talk about the kind of the background of the stability and why the CG relates to that. So,
Okay.
um, all right, let's see here. Okay, so one more weight and balance question. Let's say we're like 30 pounds over max gross takeoff weight. What's something we could do?
So if you're over the max gross, you can take out baggage or take out fuel.
Yeah, perfect. And then You'd have to recalculate the weight and balance, right? What's another consideration when we take out fuel to be underweight?
If you're taking off fuel, you got to make sure you have enough to get to your destination still,
Yeah.
or plan a fuel stop.
And what is the like? How much fuel do you need? Like, is there a
So for
requirement?
daytime VFR flights, you need enough to get to your destination plus 30 minutes of um, cruise or 75% power cruise fuel.
Right. Nice. Okay. All right. So we're gonna switch over to the cross country scenario. For those people listening, uh, the oral exams, it's not like they just sit you there and ask you questions. They have you show you everything for the flight, like we have been, like the qualifications of you, the qualification of the aircraft, and they ask you questions around that. So it's all real life scenario based stuff. So that's kind of what's going to continue as you go through and show them what the cross country flight that you've planned. So one thing they might do, and I don't know, did the examiner already give you kind of a specific scenario other than just, hey, we're going to fly from here to here?
No, that was it. He said plan across country with me on board from here to here.
Okay. So I would expect them to maybe add to that scenario when you're in your oral.
For sure.
So for example, let's they might say you got 5 hours of sleep last night. And the place we're going is a wedding, and you're the best man at the wedding. And let's say what time is your check right at?
6 a.m.
6 a.m. Okay, and then you probably be done with the oral. Probably, let's say you start the practical part at 9 a.m. or something. All right, so let's say and then how long is the flight take? Did you estimate?
Just under an hour, so 55 minutes.
Okay, so let's say it's the flight's 2 hours. Let's say it's a longer flight, and the wedding's at like 1 p.m. and we're taking off at 9 a.m. What are some possible risks for that situation that you would think about, or how would you think about that?
Yeah. Well, so first, like you said, if I got 5 hours of sleep, it's not a ton. So I got to do an assessment on myself. Like, am I rested enough for this flight? Um, Make sure I, as a pilot, am feeling good to go. Um, and then if it's a long flight, we need to be there by a certain time. We got to make sure that we're taking off with plenty of time. And if that means we might be cutting into sunrise time, so we got to make sure that we're if make sure the flight's going to be during the day. If it's not, then I need to make sure that I'm current for night activities. Yeah.
So would you it's your call as a PIC. Are we gonna take off? Are we gonna do this thing?
I mean, I think so. As long as we're not pushing it and rushing to get out, I think it would be okay. I mean, I can operate on 5 hours of sleep most days.
Okay, so your personal minimums with 5 hours of sleep is okay.
I think so.
Okay.
As long as I say I had a good breakfast, I ate. I didn't drink the day before, I would feel okay.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think that's a fine answer. I would probably lean on in your check ride saying
Towards no.
no. Yeah. But I'm glad you said, that you would do an assessment essentially. And if you
Mm-hmm.
were feeling the effects of that 5 hour sleep, but the examiner might say, sometimes we can't feel those effects. There's lots of studies on sleep and
Mm-hmm.
the reduced cognitive ability and even muscle ability that comes with not getting enough sleep. So I would err on the side of just saying no on that one. But
Okay.
in real life, it's your own personal limitation. So I'm glad you said that, and you said you do an assessment. So that's good. Okay, so let's go here, and this is so kind of just direct me around. This is the airport you're taking off of, right?
Yep. Yeah, Warren County there.
Yeah. So why don't you tell me just kind of give me an overview and I'll kind of follow along, and then tell me the checkpoint, why you chose it, and the altitude and why you chose the altitude.
So we're taking off out of India 68. And then I chose a.
Sorry, by the way, is that like missing in the SkyVector, the I-68? I couldn't find it forever.
It is.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know why. Yeah, so I chose a cruising altitude of 5,500. Main reason for that is that gives us a pretty good altitude to glide if we need to a couple different options along the way. We could go higher. That would give us maybe a little bit more options. Like we could go to 7,500. Since we're traveling eastbound, it needs to be an odd number altitude plus 500.
Okay, good.
So moving along onto my first checkpoint was, so after top of climb was going to be 10 miles based on the POH. And then from there is another 6 miles to Blanchester. Blanchester's just a small little town. There's not a ton out in this area. It's mostly farm fields and stuff. So it's pretty limited, slim pickings on visual checkpoints.
Okay. So if you're flying this at I guess what is this yellow here?
So yellow is a congested area.
So that's like the town, right? Of
that would be a town,
Lancaster. Yeah. Yeah, they and then so at night, right? The idea is that's what the lights would look like, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tiny little glow, so small town there. And then moving forward, our next checkpoint was Hillsborough, which
is that here?
Yeah, right there.
Okay.
And that town is definitely a little bit bigger. But I have a direct straight line, and my checkpoint was just going to be seeing it off my left wing.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
It's about 6 miles away, so I should be able to see it from a mile up. As well as the Highland County Airport. That's a good, decent sized airport, so you might be able to see that as well. And then so we're flying through an MOA here, which it is acceptable to fly through an MOA. You just have to exercise extreme caution. So one of the things that I would look for would be I like to fly with ForeFlight, so you can connect that to ADS-B, and you can also see other traffic. So keep an eye out for traffic in the area. I know military are supposed to have ADS-B as well, so you can see them if they are on there.
Nice.
So if it was active, if people were flying in there, then maybe I would move around it a little bit more.
Yeah. Couple questions about that. What if this was, you mentioned you were right about the MOA and that you're allowed to fly. What if it was a restricted restricted area?
Yeah, so through restricted areas, and you can't fly through those unless you get prior approval, or if the restricted area is not active.
Okay, where would you find that information?
On chart supplement.
Okay, on the margins.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, and then let's say let me see if there's a good example of one. I guess what is this right here? The VR 1632.
That is that's an airway for military.
Right. Yeah, it's a military training route. So, I guess kind of ends there, doesn't it? But let's say we were, kind of flying through there. What altitudes do those training routes operate at?
That's a good question. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, no worries. Usually I think it changes depending on the length of this code.
Yeah.
I think if it's 3 digits, and I don't remember this completely either. But I think if it's like below 1,500. They're usually lower operations for those training routes. They're usually closer to the ground. So
okay.
But anyways, maybe with, you know, here's a tip, right? I'm trying to ask you things that your path goes through, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what the examiner is going to do. So since this is so close, might be, you know, before you check ride, just to look that up, because it might be a possible question for you.
Yeah. Okay. So there, where you kind of we're just moving it around from. That's my next checkpoint at Peebles. That's another small little town. Again, like out in this area, it's probably why there's an MOA there. There's nothing out that way. So there's a tiny little town there. That was my next checkpoint, and then further down, the next checkpoint's about 20 miles away, and that's going to be the Ohio River. It's a pretty big one, next to Portsmouth, the town of Portsmouth as well.
Okay. So do you have that note in your because the one question I had when I saw Ohio River on your thing was
Yeah,
what if you see the
river's
Ohio
along.
River over here? How do you
Yeah,
know you're at this point over the river?
yeah. So for this, at least this whole section of the trip, I was going to use the York VOR.
Right here.
So I
Yeah.
should be heading towards that VOR on on a particular radial going over the Ohio River would be my checkpoint.
Okay, good.
So
So
if I'm going over the Ohio River and I am no longer on that VOR radial, then I am not in the right spot.
right. Yeah. Okay. So you're cross-checking these checkpoints with your VOR indication.
Yeah.
Nice. Very cool. All right. A couple other questions. In Peebles, there's some other, I think that I would use some other visual kind of aids. One is this line. What is this black line with like notches on it?
That is railroad track.
Nice. And then what about this kind of dark gray double line?
That would be like a highway of some kind,
Yep.
maybe.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, good. Yeah. Continue on.
So once we get to that VOR, the last major checkpoint was KDWU. That's an airport there along the river. And from there, now I think it's about 13 miles or so to the final destination.
Cool. Have you landed at this DWU?
I've not. I've never been over here before.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm curious. It looks like it's smack dab on the river. I wonder, it might be a
Yeah.
cool place to land at. Okay, yeah. So I noticed this. What is this thing right here? This little like tower looking thing.
So that's a large tower, and I believe I kind of hard to see, but I'm pretty sure that one's lighted. I can't tell. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Nice. And then what are these
Yeah.
numbers next to it mean?
So the top number is how high it is MSL, and then the parentheses number is AGL. So it's a 1,200-foot tower. So it's a pretty sizable tower.
Nice. So we'd be at 5,500. So do we have enough clearance there?
Yeah. So we got to be 1,000 feet above the tallest obstacle. So we'll be a little over 2,000. So that'd be enough.
Okay, great. Nicely done. All right. So you mentioned what airspace are we landing in? You mentioned it
Yeah.
before,
So
but
that's a Class Delta airspace.
okay. And then what's this number here?
So that's how high the airspace goes up to. So it goes from the surface up to 3,400 feet.
Okay, nice. So glass. And then what airspace would be above 3,400? Like at 3,500?
We'd be in Class Echo.
Okay, yeah, these things. Let's see. What is this like gray?
Yeah, so that's a terminal radar service area. So that means that they have radar capabilities, and in that area, those are optional to use or not.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's good that you know that because I could see him definitely asking about that since you're
For sure.
flying into it. Let's see here. And then are these numbers for the Tersa as well? These black?
They are. Yeah. So the outer ring is the 6,000 to 2,500, and then 6,000 to surface. is the smaller ring.
Nice. Okay, and then is this airport controlled, uncontrolled? How do you know?
It is controlled. So if it's got if the airport identifier is a blue, then it means that it has a control tower.
Okay, and so this one's not blue. So does that mean?
Correct. That does not have a control tower.
Okay. And then what's a star mean?
Star means that it has a beacon at the airport.
Good. And then what about, do these notches mean anything?
Yeah, I mean it means it has fuel services.
Nice. Okay, so here's the information for this airport, HTS. What's the control tower frequency?
So the control tower is where it says CT, so it's 118.5, I think. Is that what it says?
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and then I'll zoom in so you can see it better, but
Yeah, there you go.
what's the elevation?
So the field elevation there is 828.
Good. What does that L mean?
That's the I mean that the runway's lighted.
Yep. Yep. There's lighting available.
Yeah.
And then what if there was an asterisk by this L? What does that mean?
That just means that there's limitations to it, and so you'd have to go and check the supplement, see what those
Perfect.
limitations were.
Yep. And then last thing, the 70. What is that? What's that tell us?
That's the runway length. So it's got the longest runway is 7,000 feet.
Perfect. All right. Nice work. You know your charts. All right. Let's see what else I got here. Some other questions they might ask when you said the altitude. Let's say you said we need to be odd intervals. Let's say we went up to 11,500. Would we need a supplemental oxygen at that height?
At that height, no.
Okay, what if we did 13,500?
Yeah, 13,500. We would need if we're going to be above that, above 12.5 for more than 30 minutes, then the minimum flight crew would need to have oxygen available.
Nice, perfect. You kind of mentioned it before when you were determining the altitude of 5,500. You said, the VFR cruising altitude requirements, but you also mentioned like kind of why it's nice to have enough altitude. What is the glide ratio of your aircraft? Do you know?
I don't know exactly, but I know for most trainer aircraft, it's usually about a 10-to-1.
Okay, and why is that? I guess why is that important to know, and what airspeed does that relate to?
So that relates to your aircraft's best glide airspeed, which for mine it's 65 knots. So at 65 knots, if I'm at best glide, if I'm a mile up, that means that I would be able to travel 10 miles on glide.
That's the speed at which you can get your optimal
Get your best glide, yeah.
glide ratio right now. Nice. Okay. Here's just kind of a silly one. If ATC asked you what altitude you're flying at when you're flying at 8,500 feet, how would you say that on the radio? What's the like?
I would tell ATC that we're traveling at 8,500.
And what about if you're at 10,500 feet? How would you want to say that over the radio?
10,500.
Nice. If ATC calls out, let's say we're flying along and they call out traffic at 2 o'clock, 5 miles westbound, when we're making, what is this heading, like 150 or something. So they say, what did I say? I forgot what I said. 2 o'clock, 5 miles westbound. Where, and let's say let me zoom in here. All right, let's say we're at Peebles, right? So and we're flying, southeast, and they say 2 o'clock, 5 miles westbound. Where would you expect that
Um,
aircraft to be?
so if it was at 2 o'clock, it maybe kind of around that 2-4, the big 2-4 number, and then they would be traveling towards us
Yep.
ish.
What I say, westbound?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you got it. Um, good. And what is this 2-4, by the way?
2-4 there. That's the highest point in that section of the grid, plus 300 feet, I think.
Yeah, it's like I think you're right, and it's like rounded to the
Round to the nearest or the highest 100,
and then
the
plus
next 100,
300. Yeah,
and then plus 300. Yeah. So in that case, the tallest object could be 2,000 and just under 100, or
right.
right at.
Nice. Yeah, so it's like a quick way to just kind of plan your altitudes, right? Because
Mhm.
you're like, okay, I have to be above 1,900, 1,700, 2,400. Okay, I'll pick
Yeah.
5,500. Nice. All right. Let's see here. All right, let's kind of go to this guy. How you doing on time? You good?
Yeah. Doing great.
Cool. If you need like water or anything, you want to, no, it looks like you got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, cool.
I'm prepared, man.
All right, so um let's kind of talk about this. Can you see this okay? Or I guess you got it
Yep.
in
Yeah.
front of
I've
you,
got
but
mine in front of me as well.
okay. So this TC true course, how did you get your true course?
So for true course, I laid out the sectional and then used my plotter and figured out the heading.
Nice. And then kind of jumping back to here, you have this plus 11. What is that?
So that's the wind correction angle. So I figured out what the winds were and used my E6B and got the wind correction angle.
Okay. I'm not gonna have you do your E6B, but they might give you an E6B problem.
Hmm.
But what other information did you need to do that? You said you had used your E6B with true course. What other information did you need to find that wind correction angle?
So I needed the wind direction and then the wind speed. And so that's over on the in the left column. You can see it was at 275 was the direction and 25 knots was the velocity.
Nice. Okay, and then all right, you have this plus so I'm following along, right? We go 130 plus 11 to get to our true heading of 141, and then we have this plus 6.
Yep.
What is
That's
that?
our magnetic variance. And so if you can see on the chart, you've got those like isogonic lines.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's one.
Yeah, so the one closer to destination I think is 7 west.
Okay. But yeah, this magenta line, right?
Yep.
Cool. All right, good. And that is the magnetic variation. Cool. And then so we add 6 to get 147. That's our magnetic heading. And then what's the plus 3?
So the last one is the magnetic deviation from the instruments in the airplane that cause a difference um, in the compass itself.
Right. They disrupt the magnetic field a little bit. So cool. So then that 150, that's what you're actually gonna fly.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. I think so. We got, let's see, let's talk about the speed. So you got 74 here. Is that your what airspeed is that?
That's our climbing up the cruise airspeed.
So is that your indicated, calibrated, or
That's our true airspeed. The calibrated
okay?
airspeed is pretty much the same. It's like one or less than a knot difference. So I just use the true airspeed.
Okay. And how do you get the How'd you come up with that?
There's a chart in the POH
For
for climb. Up, I don't know what they call it. Let me look it up real quick.
so these are all true airspeeds?
No, indicated airspeeds.
Okay. So you're saying the indicated airspeed is basically the same as calibrated airspeed, and you know that
Correct.
from the chart. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. All right. So and then your true airspeed, you don't have that on here. You just went to ground speed, right? On here.
Yeah.
Okay. But so okay, so tell me how you got from your calibrated airspeed here, which you're saying is essentially the same thing as indicator airspeed for the slow aircraft we fly. And so tell me how you got from that to ground speed. So 74 to 90 for this first leg.
Yeah. So on the E6P, you take your winds and the speed, and then you spin the dial, and it'll line up a with what your ground speed would be, taking those winds into account.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect.
So
yeah.
for us, we have a slight tailwind. It's quartering tailwind or so it increases our speed. So ground speed is going to be higher than our airspeed.
Nice. All right. Speaking of the wind, where did you get the wind information?
On aviationweather.gov.
And is it did you get it from like what kind of report did you get it from?
So for this one, it was just the winds aloft.
Okay. What altitude did you use on that winds aloft?
6,000.
Okay. Um yeah. Yeah. I think that's probably fine. They might, because this is the first leg and you'll be climbing up there. They might.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they would dock you or anything like that, but they might say, why'd you choose 6,000? Why not 3,000 or something? They might ask
Mm-hmm.
something like that, but
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think it's
do
fine.
you think would it be better for that first leg to have used something closer to the ground? So use a halfway point, or
That's what I do. I use the halfway point. I'm not
okay,
gonna have you. I think you're fine. I'm not gonna have you redo all this stuff. But if
yeah,
you end up having to because you're flying on a new day, I would probably use 3,000 if you have it.
okay,
The key here is like to always have a reason for what you do. So I could
yeah,
see the examiner being like, well, why did you win? If you're not flying at 6,000 yet because you're not your top of climb, like
yeah,
why'd you use 6,000? So
yeah,
it's
yeah. That makes sense. Okay.
yeah. Okay, what else? Okay, so the fuel. Can you tell me how you kind of calculated these fuel values on the right side?
Yeah. So we're planning to start with full tanks. So start with 40 gallons. And then in the POH, there is there's a cruise performance chart, so that you can use that to figure out what your cruise altitude is going to be, your speed, and what the fuel consumption rate would be. And then there's also the time, fuel, and distance to climb chart to give you our initial one. So our initial one, I think I've got 2.7 there.
So you use the climb chart for that one?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, good.
So climb chart for that one. So to climb up to 5,500 feet, it was going to be 1.1 gallons. And then you also have to add in, or no, sorry, it was going to be 1.5, 1.6. Yeah, 1.6. And then you add 1.1 for the start, taxi, and takeoff allowance as well to
Okay.
give us the 2.7.
Nice. And then the rest of these are the cruise performance chart?
Correct. Yeah. And so that's based off of 7 gallons per hour. And then you're using E6B to calculate the total time of that leg. And then you're multiplying that by the gallons per hour, and using E6B, you get those numbers.
Nice. All right. Sounds pretty good. Just curious, this is just kind of like your alternates, the frequencies and distances.
Yep. Yeah.
All right.
So for each leg, I put what the closest airport was to that specific checkpoint, and then what their CTAF or control tower frequency was, and how far it is from that checkpoint.
Oh yeah, I like that a lot. It's good.
Yeah, that way if there's a diversion required, it's good to just have that right in front of me.
Yeah, and like we talked about the how if you lose an engine, how far you got to glide, right? This is
Mm-hmm.
this distance right there. Yeah,
Yeah.
nice. All right. Good. Let's see here. Oh yeah. We talked about wins. Oh, not that one. That's the decoded version. Can you let's see here. I gotta zoom out a little bit. Can you see this?
Yep.
Okay. So let's just do the there's a bunch of remarks on this one, and I don't think a examiner is going to expect you to remember all these remarks. So maybe just until the remarks, can you tell me what this METAR up here on the top says?
Yep. So that is the airport that we're planning on flying to. That's Huntington. And then that is the time that the forecast came out. So that was on the 3rd at 20:51 Zulu. And then it was automatic. It wasn't hand typed or spoken.
Mhm.
And then those are our winds. So they're coming out 240, 11 gusting 18. And then we got 10-mile visibility. We've got a few clouds at 4,600, few at 10,000. And then that is our temperature and dew point.
Nice.
And that's our altimeter setting.
Yeah, low pressure, huh?
Yeah.
Probably that weather you're talking about. Okay, and then what about the TAF here? Can you do that?
Yeah. So TAF that's the time that it was created, was on the 3rd at 21:13 Zulu. And it is valid from the 3rd at 2100 to the 4th at 1800.
Nice.
And then the wind's 240, 11 gusts and 18. It is plus 6 miles visibility, so it's greater than 6 miles. And then the showers in the vicinity broken at 5,000 clouds.
Nice. And then tempo, what does that mean?
So that's temporary from those times. So the 3rd 21 to 3rd 2400. Visibility is going to be 4 statute miles, and then you have light rain showers.
Nice. And then you don't have to do these other ones, but what about this code right here?
So that one is light rain snow shower. So it's going to be a rain snow mix.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm not flying tomorrow. And then
do you
broken
know?
clouds at 1,000.
Oh yeah. Just for fun, take a stab at the remarks. Yeah. Okay. Let me try and do it because I was okay. I think this is a code
that's the type of precipitation reporting. I
right.
know.
Yeah. So I think it has precipitation. The peak wind was 250 at 33 knots at 1957. This is rain began 1959 east that night east 19 miles east maybe. Sea level pressure in like hectopascals. I don't know why they change all the units of so stupid. And then this is precipitation for the last hour, and then this is the last 6 hours precipitation amount. Temperature and dew point, I think it's like this one's hard. It's like if the first digit's a 1, it's negative, and it's like so like the temperature is like 11.1, and then the dew point is like 0.6 or something like that. And then I don't know what the hell that is. All right, cool. Let's see here. What else we got? Good job, man. You're doing good. All right, yeah. Can you tell me how you did like your takeoff and landing distance, how you know that you're gonna have enough runway and stuff like that?
Yeah, so that's other stuff that's in the POH. They've got a takeoff and landing distance chart, and so for takeoff, the POH assumes max weight, and so you just figure out what your pressure altitude. So for the airport that we were going to take off at, our pressure altitude was going to be right around 1500 or so. So I just like to round up to be conservative with these. So I would use the 2000. So we'll need, so we'll look at what the temperature is going to be. When I was looking before, ground temperatures were going to be like 2 or 3 Celsius. So we can use the 0 Celsius column, and it would be 1770 to clear a 50-foot obstacle.
Okay, yeah, I have the landing. I found the landing distance, but just so
Okay.
people have a visual, but just so you know, this isn't the same thing as what you're reading
Yeah.
off. But yeah, so basically you grabbed a value here first,
Yeah.
0, 50 to clear 50-foot obstacle. And then why did you do 50-foot obstacle? Is there an obstacle?
No, but
Just to be conservative?
just to be safe.
Okay, yeah. So
So
yeah, that's kind of like if you're asked that, yeah, just always have a good reason. Just be like, hey, yeah, just to be. I just always do it because personal limitation. I just wanted that to be conservative. Yeah.
yeah. And then yeah, same thing for the landing. But with each of these, you also have to read the notes above. So if there's a headwind, you can decrease these distances by a certain amount. For the sake of conservative, you can not decrease it if you have a headwind and just still assume that you need that certain length.
Yeah.
And then yeah, if you're landing on grass or something, you have to increase the distances by quite a bit.
Cool. And then I think it cut you off, but the rest of then so you get like um you do this twice, right? And then subtract the differences. Or
I'm not sure what do you mean.
so because you're taking off, what's the elevation you're taking off on?
It's like 900 feet.
Okay, so since you're not taking off on sea level, I'm not 100% with Cessna, but I'm pretty sure on the Cessna you um just like it is with like a Cherokee, you basically want to get a value for your takeoff. So let's say you said it's about 900, so 1,000 feet, and then you'd get this number.
Mhm.
Oh, but no, never mind. Yeah, maybe that's the climb performance chart.
Yes, that is. I think I know what you're talking about for. Um,
Yeah, like where you get
yeah,
one
that's the
value and
climb
then
chart.
okay. Yeah, sorry. All right.
Yeah, so if I'm at 1500, then I'm cruising up to 5000 or something. I subtract the difference between those.
Right. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah, I'm just not used to the Cessna charts. But yeah, okay, cool. Let's see what else we got here. Oh yeah, kind of going back to the takeoff and landing stuff. Let's say, and this is something that they could add to your scenario. Um, they could be on the lookout for this in your scenario. That what they did to me is they said, my full scenario, obviously we didn't fly the whole thing, but my full scenario was to a high elevation airport here in California. And then they said, it's 85 degrees when we get there. So what are some things to consider when, let's say, 5,000 foot elevation, it's 85 degrees. What would you
Mhm.
consider as a pilot flying into that?
Yeah. So for anything high altitude like that, and being warmer, our density altitude is going to be through the roof. And so we need to consider our takeoff and landing performance, and if we're going to have enough runway to be able to land at this airport. And then can we also, if we can land at it, can we take back off?
Nice. Good. Yeah, so be on the lookout for them to sneak, a density altitude consideration in there.
Mhm.
And then why does elevation and temperature, high temperature, why does that reduce our performance?
Reduces the performance because the air is less dense, and so there is less air for wings to grab onto to create lift.
Yep. Yeah, and then also less for the propeller to grab onto, less for the engine to, mix with fuel and
Mm-hmm.
combust. So yeah, everything good. What else? So you said altitude affects it negatively. Temperature rise affects it negatively. Is there anything else that increases density altitude?
Humidity.
Yeah. Yep. Very good. Um, that's it, man. That's all I got for you. Um, they might ask maybe some, I mean, obviously there might be some things based off what you missed. If you want to read off what you missed, I could ask you some more if we missed anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a handful. I got them written down as well as what the
Yeah,
actual
so
thing.
for people watching, we're talking about the ACS test codes of what he missed on the written. The examiner on your Checkride is going to be sure to they create a plan for you what they're going to test on you, and they use the ACS and they use what you missed on the written. So they're going to be sure to ask you things about what you missed on the written. So uh just make sure you're up on those. So that's why I'm asking Alex kind of what that is.
Yeah. So the first two of mine were about taxiing. So one was the airport marking signs and lights. Um, I'm pretty sure the question that I got wrong on the exam was something about nighttime lighting.
Oh,
And
okay.
then there might have been another one about the runway hold short signs. So it was like the red signs. I think that was one of them as well.
Okay. Um,
But
good. So
I feel
yeah,
like I have
so
a pretty good grasp on those now. So I
okay.
don't know if you want to go through those or not, but I think I've got a pretty good grasp on those now.
Okay. Yeah, what else? Tell me what else.
Um, Another one was normal takeoff and climb as it relates to VX and VY. And then take or soft field takeoff and climb as it relates to ground effect.
Okay. So how about yeah, what is VX and VY?
So VX is the best angle of climb. We use that for short field takeoff to get up over our 50-foot obstacle. And then VY is best rate of climb. So that is going to be the airspeed that's set for that will get us up to a certain altitude in the least amount of time.
Nice. And then you said, okay, so um was it soft field or short field
Soft
takeoff?
field takeoff and climb as it relates to ground effect.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, when we do a soft field takeoff, what's the goal? What's the kind of the number one goal on a soft field takeoff?
So on a soft field takeoff, the goal is to get up airborne as quickly as possible. That way, we avoid any potential hazards that are on this soft field.
And then do we want to take into any consideration anything of the nose wheel?
Yeah, so we want to get the nose wheel up as quickly as possible. So we're just riding the mains until we're able to get airborne.
Right. You want to take weight off that so it doesn't like stick in the mud or whatever.
Yeah.
And then so yeah, you can, let's say, rotate speed is, let's say it's 60. But you can actually get airborne at 55, 50 knots. What is happening? Why can you get airborne before the recommended, takeoff
Mhm.
speed?
Yeah, so that's due to ground effect. So the induced drag that you're creating on the plane is creating downdraft essentially, but it has nowhere to go, and so it turns that downdraft into lift, and then so you get airborne with that lift. But as you start to climb out of that ground effect, you will lose that lift.
Right. So when you're close to the ground, you get some added performance that allows you to kind of take off. And then so yeah, I guess what do you want to do when you take off from soft field? All right, because we want to take off early and then we want to get into ground effect. What kind of is the procedure after that?
Yeah. So once we get into ground effect, we want to maintain that and keep that going um, until we reach a safe speed, which would be VY. So let's say for my airplane, that's 70, 76. So we're gonna stay in ground effect and keep flying straight level until we hit that 76 knots, and then we start to climb out at that rate.
Nice. And do you know about how high above the ground effect starts?
So it starts, I think, one width of your wingspan.
Nice. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And then it
let's say
gets
my
more.
wingspan's 30 feet. Yeah, as you start to get closer to the ground, the effect gets greater. It's exponential.
Nice. Good. So I pulled up my kind of our ground school taxiway and runway lighting systems quiz. I'll just ask you a couple on there. What color are taxiway center line lights?
Um, Center line, they green.
Yes. And then what happens when they start to turn yellow or they start to alternate green, yellow, green, yellow, green, yellow? What does that mean?
That means you're coming up to the end of it.
Yeah, so you're approaching a runway, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Let's see here. What's another good one? What is so you have a 2-bar VASI, all right, and you got white, white. So one row of white, one row of white. What does that mean when you're coming into land?
That means you're above the glide slope.
Nice. And then what if you had a 3-bar VASI? What would be 2 red rows and 1 white row? What would that mean?
Um, that would mean that you're below the glide slope.
Right, you're slightly below, or you're on the
Yeah.
lower glide slope because sometimes they'll have multiple kind of glide slopes. They want more so IFR traffic to follow,
Yeah.
depending on the size of your aircraft. But good. Let me see one more here. Um, come on. Nah, it's not good. They're not gonna ask that. Um, maybe we'll just call it. Oh, okay. What lights are used to increase the visibility of a hold short and taxiway intersection lines on the pavement surface?
Sorry, say that one more time.
What lights are used to increase the visibility of hold short and taxiway intersection lines on the pavement surface? So like like the hold short when you're coming up to the
Yeah.
runway, sometimes they might have actual lights on there.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. I don't know.
that's a tough one, but those are clearance bar lights. All right, let's continue
Okay.
on to
Are
different
those
things.
are they actually on or in the pavement, or are they off to the side lighting up the pavement?
I think clearance bars are on the pavement,
Yeah. Okay.
I believe. Yeah. All right, but what other Is that all of them? Or no, that's not all of them, right?
No. Let's see here. Navigation systems and radar services. So ground-based navigation, orientation, course determination, equipment tests, and regulations.
Okay.
So
Okay.
ground-based navigation being VOR stuff, I think.
Yep. Yeah. So how do you test your VOR?
Yeah, that's a good one.
How do you make sure?
um,
So let's say you're on the ground, right? You're not flying yet, and you want to make sure your VOR's instrument's working.
yeah, there's a ground test you can do, but I'm not sure what it is.
Okay, yeah, no worries. It's called, yeah, so there's VOT, it's a VOR test signal. So you would dial that into it and then into your nav radio and connect your VOR. And then I believe it's I always forget this, but I believe you if it's working, you want to see 182 or 360 from. Don't quote me on that. Look that up, but um, basically wherever you are in the airport, that's what you should have, and that tells you your at least your stuff in the aircraft is working. When you get into IFR stuff, there's more things to check the sensitivity of your VOR, but they don't really teach that in too much in private pilot. But what about if you're flying around, like you said, you were going to use that York VOR or whatever?
Mhm.
How do you know that that ground-based station is actually working?
Um, so I tune into it, and I'm pretty sure like on the charts and stuff, I think there's points that they have um, based around it that you can look up in the supplement that'll tell you it's exactly this far on this radial, and this is where you would do your test to see how accurate that is.
Yeah, so
And then
there's
it's supposed to
VOR.
be within a couple degrees of variation.
Yeah, so those are VOR checkpoints, and you're right that that's true. But I was kind of thinking like just something not particularly that, just to make sure that it's operational, that it's not like turned off, it's not under maintenance.
We could tune into the frequency and check for the Morse code,
Yeah, there you go.
see if that's on.
Yeah, perfect. All right. What else?
Mm, that's about it. We've covered the other ones. The other one was night preparation, so lighting systems at the airport. Um, Covered some of those.
Nice.
Yeah, I think that's about it.
All right. Well, I think you would definitely pass. So the oral. So I think you're set up good. I would give you a pass if it were me, but I'm not a DPE. Um, but yeah, so I think hopefully I saw you taking notes. So I think there were some recommendations I had in there for you. Just shore up those
Mhm.
areas and maybe comb through your route, to see, what are some other type of hazards or things they
Yeah.
might ask that we're gonna fly through, because sometimes they specifically choose these routes so that they can ask you questions around the stuff you're going to fly through. So
Hmm.
just looking at yours, it's okay. It's, special airspace, the MOA, it's the it's that obstacle you flew over, it's the Tersa, it's like maybe those military training routes we talked about, um, that type of stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, good job.
Thank you.